So we're here to tell you the story about our Woolens.
Yep.
Our farm-raised Woolens that we have been waiting on for a really, really long time.
Like 3 years.
Like 3 years. So in 2020, I think it was, we decided that we had all these bags of wool. We just shorn our sheep. And we said, what are we going to do with all of this wool? 3 bags full, or maybe more. And we've been raising sheep for a long time. So if you don't know that about us, we've been raising sheep for, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And then only a couple of years, well, maybe a year ago, we decided that we were going to take a break from sheep. So we haven't had sheep in a year at least. Mainly because we had raised the sheep to be super wild. We wanted a hardy breed that didn't need to be babied. We wanted it to grow well on the land. We wanted it to improve the land and also be healthy. We wanted it to not be wormy. We wanted it to not need vaccinations. So the line of sheep that we had been working on was a cross between Dorset, which is a pretty docile sort of, I would think it's kind of from like Scottish
it's like your
Irish.
traditional commercial breed.
Traditional commercial breed for wool. When you think about the wool fiber that it would make, it'd be pretty coarse, sort of similar to like a fisherman's sweater.
It's like the toboggan that your grandma made you wear.
That was super itchy.
Yeah.
And then we also had a sheep that was a heritage breed. It was a Jacob sheep, and we wanted it. We've had it for years because it's said to have descended from the actual herd of Jacob. And it can have anywhere from 4 to 6 horns. And so...
that's just cool.
Very cool. And it was spotted. So as the Bible story goes, Jacob tried to rear the sheep to have spots so that he would keep them because Laban, who he was working for, promised that he would be able to keep any of the herd that was, I guess Laban didn't realize that you could breed sheep intentionally to have spots.
Jacob had like a magic stick to make that happen.
That's true. Yeah. Anyway, so Jacob had this really beautiful thing going on, and these sheep are very, very heritage, and most heritage breeds tend to be more vital, super vital. They don't need a lot of inputs. They don't need a lot of oversight, but they are generally more wild too. So not as friendly, not as like easy to work with. So we had created this land race of animals that was completely almost 100% wild.
Like herding deer.
So we were herding them as people. So we would use our children as dogs, and they would go into the woods, and I would go into the woods, and we would carry big sticks, and we would try to herd them, and it became very stressful. The wilder they got, the harder it was. You couldn't lure them anymore with a bucket of feed. They just wouldn't come to it. So anyway, that was why we made our decision to let the sheep go temporarily. Now we have a dog that we're raising, and hopefully we will be able to bring sheep back and have a more appropriate animal to herd the sheep. And it might be less stressful. I think we talk about it a lot, but one of our major things on the homestead is we don't want to create an environment that stresses us out. We want one that's, it just makes us happy. All of us, children included. So realizing that it wasn't a great family dynamic herding sheep together, we decided to let them go temporarily. But all that wool we've made over the years, we've sent it off to a mill on the East Coast that does a really great job turning it into yarn or turning it into roving. We've had both of those, and we have a stockpile of both of those. And so we said, we don't need any more of that.
When you raise sheep, you start like having all of the wool products, and at a certain point it like builds up, and you're like, okay, what else could we try?
Which, quick lesson, so some sheep produce wool that you shear and you gather every year, and some sheep, ironically called hair sheep, do not make wool.
That's because they have hair instead of wool.
I don't know who determines what's hair and what's wool, but
they shed it.
Anyway, so we shore all our sheep. Both Jacob and Dorset are wool sheep. So of course we raise most of our animals as dual purpose. So we want them for more than one purpose on our farm. And for them it was wool and then also meat. They make delicious meat also. Okay, so we decided that we would check the box that said make socks on that sheet that we were filling out. And we thought, yeah, that'll be cool. And, normally the turnaround on our yarn is about 6 months. Or roving is about 6 months. We send it off, and about 6 months later we get it back. Maybe 3 to 6 months. It might be faster.
Depending on the time of year. Because most commercial sheep farmers all shear like early spring, late winter.
Before babies are born.
Yeah.
So it could be March, April, maybe even February.
So taking a step back, you also have to like schedule the lady to come out and shear your sheep, because we tried that one year, 2020, when nobody was going anywhere, and that was miserable.
It's a real skill.
Yeah.
And she also it requires really nice sharp tools, and those sharp tools are pretty dangerous. So
you can kill a sheep
for
quick.
a sheep and for yourself. So we decided to hire it out. We had a great lady that came out many years, and she was wonderful.
But she has like a backlog of like a year, so you have to like get it on her schedule for the following year. Yeah. That's like the start of the process.
Okay, so we had them shorn. We had these bags of wool. We needed to do something with them. We checked the box for socks. And then they called us and told us how much it was going to be. And we dropped our jaws and we said, But we thought, it's going to be so cool to have these socks. We should really just go. We should splurge. We should do it. Would be so cool.
And we do have 12 feet in our family. So it's like.
That's true.
We go through some socks.
Right. It was about 28 pounds of wool that we sent in. Or 29, and that ended up being an expensive thing to turn them into socks. But we said, you know what, let's just go for it. And about 8 months later, we're like, where are our socks? Maybe even a full year later. It had been a while.
We forgot about it.
We figured it would take a while longer than making yarn, because it's more of a two-step process. First, you got to make yarn, then you got to put them on knitting machines. And so we reached out, and they said, oh yeah, we have your yarn. The next step is you actually need to reach out to the knitters, and they will turn them into socks. So you need to reach out to them. So we're like, oh, okay. So we reached out to them, and they were great, really nice on the phone. And then they sent us a bill and said, okay, it's going to be this much more.
It was
which was double what we'd already paid for the yarn. And we looked at ourselves, at each other, and we were like, we're not doing that. We can't do it. We're not investing in that. Like, we just, I guess, get our yarn back. I don't know what to do, but we can't do that. And then I talked to somebody on the phone there, and she was the sweetest little girl. I don't know.
You have no idea.
I have no idea how old she is. In my mind, she's like 22.
Yeah.
I don't know. She was very young sounding, and she was just like, oh, I understand how you feel. And she just went on with me Drew was in the car listening to the conversation, and she just was like, but you have to understand, your socks are going to be beautiful. And when you get that box of full of socks and hats, you're going to open it and you're going to show it to everybody, and everybody's going to be so excited to have a product from your sheep, from your farm. And I'm going to cry just thinking about it. So it was like, she was just like checking all the boxes. She's like, and you're going to be supporting this American-made product, and you're going to be showing people how important it is to have this locally sourced, American-made. You're going to be bringing people back to shopping in the United States and America. And like, it just was, oh my gosh.
She got Lacey.
She got me. Woo! She got me. And so
her next phone call was selling ice cubes to Eskimos.
Anyway, so she convinced me that we needed to make the investment and buy these socks. So we sent the rest of the money. Actually, we didn't. We just said, okay, fine. At that point, we just had to choose the kinds of things that we wanted to have made, of which there were hundreds of choices. It was a little bit overwhelming. And we had to, commit to paying for them once they were done. We wouldn't get them until they had been knit, and they would call us and say, okay, I pay your invoice, and then they would send them. So we were like, okay, all right. And she actually stepped me through each step. She's like, okay, here's how much you have invested. You have invested the wool, the time. You've invested, raising these sheep. You've invested paying for the yarn to be made. You've invested, now it's here, and you're going to invest in us turning it into all these products. So she broke down the cost for me, and I was like, it's not a cheap sock, but I've paid more for something that I think is worth that. And so, and I also looked at other socks and was like, oh, okay, yeah, that seems about right. So, that said, that was about, I don't know, when was that? A year ago?
A year ago.
Yeah. It had to have been, because it's been at least 2.5 years since we sent the wool in. So here we are waiting and finally, every once in a while we looked at each other and be like, where are those socks? Where are those socks? Are they done yet? Are they done yet? And I mean, it's a super small company. Both the mill that we used for to make the yarn and the mill that turns it into socks, very, very small companies on the East Coast. And so finally, a month ago or so, they said, okay, we're ready. Send us your money. And we were like, oh no, not really sure if we can afford this right now.
So we saved up.
So we saved up. Those bills just never come at a good time, right? But we saved up, we paid the bill. They came last week, and now we've been working, hustling to make labels for them, to share with y'all, get you excited about these, and hopefully you are, and hopefully you're excited about the story of these beautiful socks. They were raised on our farm, really, and sent off. So you can read the full story below. Drew used some current technology to create a very cute little story in the style of Tolkien, if you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. So it's there and back again, A Sheepish Tale. But we have socks, different sizes. These are our crew socks, so they're a little bit higher than the ankle sock. These are my favorite. We got the most of these. We got green, and we have a natural color. They're sized. So you can pick the size, read the descriptions, it'll tell you about the sizing. We have hats like this is a beanie, traditional beanie. We have headbands, and we have a flip hat, not very many of those, and a few pairs of ankle socks, not a ton of those either. So grab them while they're available, and help us sell out of these socks. So we have enough for our family, but then enough for your families as well. And know that when you're wearing them, it's making our day. People have asked about the nylon. There is an additional thread. You can see it in the green. That's the added thread. That adds a little bit of stretch to the sock. And if you didn't have that, they would become so slouchy and droop down around your ankles. In the olden days, they had to wear garters, or what do they call those things that men
Those
wore?
little clippy things.
Those little clippy things to hold up their woolen socks, because without the stretch, they just fall down. They also wear out really quickly because rubbing on wool breaks the fibers. And when you have a stretch, it holds it together for a much longer period of time. So they're super thick and cozy and comfy. However, wool is a temperature regulator, so it doesn't heat you up so much that you become uncomfortable. It lets the air kind of pass through and your sweat pass through, so you don't get overly sweaty and gross like you would in a blend of, like a polyester sock or something like that. So, and cotton holds moisture, so they get damp and wet. And when I worked at a outfitters, they taught us to teach people that cotton kills, because if you go camping, or if you're outside for an extended period of time and you're wearing cotton socks, you'll freeze to death, because your socks will get wet from your sweat and then get cold and freeze. So, and true for hats too. So you really want wool to keep you the warmest temperature, but also not too warm. In fact, they make wool, like cowboy hats are mostly wool.
Really?
Yeah, for the same reason, because they're wicking. Breathable.
Yeah.
Yes. So even though they're warm, they're not like, except for the headband, which is lined with fleece. So that will be hotter, warmer, potentially, than the others. But anyway, that's it. Enjoy. Buy socks. Buy hats. Thanks for stopping by. We'll talk soon.